Welcome. I want to invite you to join us for an extensive hour-long exploration of a heavily documented online encyclopedia article.
The documentation regarding the 2022 Winnipeg serial killings is highly comprehensive.
It is. We have a vast amount of source material to cover today, and we are going to proceed with absolute precision.
The parameters of this analysis require a strict adherence to the chronological data.
Exactly. Our mission for this exploration is to methodically trace the timeline of a highly complex criminal case.
Establishing a baseline requires breaking down multiple logistical and procedural layers.
Right. We will begin by examining the biographical background of the perpetrator. Then we will analyze the meticulous timeline of the crimes themselves.
Following the initial timeline, the systemic analysis will shift to the political and logistical hurdles.
Specifically regarding the search for the victim's remains. Yes. From there, we will detail the procedural steps of the criminal trial and finally evaluate the broader societal impact and legislative changes up to the most recent updates in the year 2025.
This methodology requires the extraction of specific dates, organizational details, and event sequences from the source text.
It does. We will build a highly detailed narrative timeline, layer by layer, so that you can understand the complete scope of these events.
The chronological starting point is the biographical data of the individual at the center of the case.
Let us look at that documented background right now. The individual is Jeremy Anthony Michael Skibicki.
The records indicate he was born in either 1986 or 1987.
And geographically, his origins are located in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
The sources also provide specific familial variables.
Right. They note that his birth mother was originally from the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. That is on the eastern coast of Canada.
However, the primary developmental environment was different. He was adopted.
Yes, he was raised by a Polish family in Winnipeg. Now, as we examine his background leading into his adult years, the source material reveals a very specific history.
It is a documented, escalating history of domestic violence spanning several years.
And it is critical to note a specific demographic detail here. Both of his previous partners, who are detailed in these court records, were of Indigenous descent.
Specifically, Métis. The demographic consistency of the previous partners is statistically significant when evaluating behavioral patterns.
So you were looking at that as a precursor?
Correct. The documentation indicates a repeated targeting of Indigenous women of Métis descent long before the events of 2022. This establishes a documented behavioral baseline.
Let us trace the timeline of this violence as it begins to manifest in the legal system.
The earliest relevant legal data point in the text is a conviction in June 2015.
At that time, Skibicki was convicted following an assault on his common-law partner. The documentation explicitly notes a severe vulnerability regarding this victim.
She was pregnant at the time of the assault.
She was, and the documented abuse during this 2015 incident was severe.
The records categorize it as physical assault, specifically noting strangulation and repeated punching.
Furthermore, he issued violent threats. He told his partner he would kill her if she attempted to contact law enforcement.
Strangulation is a critical data point. From a behavioral analysis standpoint, it is not merely physical assault.
What does it indicate clinically?
It is a demonstration of absolute physical control over the victim's respiration and, by extension, their life.
Especially when coupled with those lethal threats.
Yes. When coupled with threats of lethal retaliation for seeking help, it demonstrates a calculated method of coercion designed to ensure compliance.
Following this assault, the victim sought a protection order from the courts. However, the court records show that her request for a protection order was dismissed.
The judicial outcome for the assault charge itself is also documented.
Right. He received a sentence of 2 months in prison and 2 years of probation. I want to ask you about the efficacy of that legal outcome.
The documentation indicates a failure of preliminary judicial interventions to alter the behavioral trajectory.
Because the violence continued.
A 2-month custodial sentence followed by a probationary period did not mitigate the risk. The systemic pattern of violence continued to escalate.
We see that escalation clearly as the timeline moves forward to his subsequent marriage.
The records state this marriage lasted from 2019 to 2022.
And on the date of their very first wedding anniversary in 2019, his then-wife filed a protection order against him.
The filing of a protection order exactly 1 year into the marriage suggests that the cycle of coercion established in the 2015 relationship had transferred.
It transferred directly to the new relationship.
The rapid deterioration of the marital environment aligns with the established data regarding his behavioral patterns.
The escalation continued severely into 2021. In that year, Skibicki faced a series of very serious charges regarding his wife.
The charges included disobeying court orders and issuing highly specific violent threats.
The records list threats to torture, traffic, or abduct her. He was also charged with assault with a deadly weapon.
This progression represents a clear, systemic escalation.
The documentation shows that his wife officially filed paperwork for a divorce in May of 2022.
Moving from physical violence in 2015 to the utilization of a deadly weapon and threats of abduction by 2021 demonstrates a methodical intensification of the threat level.
To understand the foundational beliefs operating in the background of these escalating events, we must look at the perpetrator's ideology.
The text references a digital footprint analysis.
Yes. A media investigation conducted by CBC News heavily scrutinized Skibicki's personal Facebook page. What they found was a high concentration of extremist material.
Digital footprints often serve as a repository for ideological frameworks. These frameworks rationalize subsequent actions.
The investigation cataloged the specific nature of this content. They classified it as overtly violent, anti-Semitic, misogynistic, and rooted in white supremacy.
The categorization of the material is essential for understanding the underlying belief system.
What is particularly notable is his self-identified affiliation with specific fringe movements.
The sources indicate organizational affiliations.
Right. Skibicki described himself as a member of a concept or group referred to as Holy Europe. He also explicitly linked himself to the Alliance of Patriotic Parallel Movements of European Folks.
That organization is abbreviated as APPMEF.
APPMEF, exactly.
The adherence to an organization such as APPMEF provides a structural context for his digital activity. The source text describes APPMEF as a far-right organization.
The ideology of APPMEF, as outlined in the documentation, is centered on a very specific set of beliefs.
It centers on the promotion of the belief that white Europeans must preserve their bloodlines.
They advocate that these bloodlines are at risk of being diluted. They perceive the negative forces of race mixing, multiculturalism, and immigration as direct threats.
This specific ideology operates on a framework of ethno-nationalism and racial exclusivity.
How does that intersect with the facts of the case we are examining?
The core tenet relies entirely on a binary categorization of populations. It divides people into in-groups, out-groups.
So multiculturalism and immigration are not viewed as societal norms.
Within this framework, they are classified as active threats to genetic purity. Anyone outside of the perceived European bloodline is inherently devalued.
When you cross-reference that ideological framework with the demographic profile of victims,
a direct intersection emerges. All of the victims were Indigenous women.
The documented adherence to an ideology that explicitly devalues non-European populations correlates systematically with the targeting of Indigenous individuals.
The digital footprint serves as a documented ideological precursor. It provides a structured rationalization for the violence against the specific demographic group.
We must now establish the chronological timeline of the spring of 2022.
This requires methodically profiling the 4 victims based on the provided text.
It is imperative that we lay out the specific details regarding these 4 women. According to statements provided by family members, there is a shared variable.
All 4 of these victims were experiencing homelessness at the time of their disappearances.
That socioeconomic variable is highly consistent across the dataset.
It is critical to understanding the methodology. Individuals experiencing homelessness possess limited access to secure environments.
They also lack reliable communication networks
and standard social safety nets.
I want to make sure you, the listener, grasp exactly what that means in this context.
From a clinical analysis standpoint, the commonality of homelessness signifies the exploitation of specific systemic vulnerabilities.
Because they lacked a permanent address or a daily routine anchored to a secure location, it became significantly easier for someone to exploit them.
It facilitates the crimes and delays immediate detection by law enforcement or family members.
I will now outline the profiles of the 4 victims in the estimated chronological order of the crimes.
The first victim in the established timeline is Ashley Shingus.
Police believe she was killed on or around March 15, 2022.
For a significant period of the investigation, her identity was unknown to authorities.
During that time, she was referred to by elders and advocates as Marcedes Myran.
That translates to Buffalo Woman.
It does. The cultural context regarding her temporary name represents a significant departure from standard administrative procedures.
Standard procedures for unidentified remains typically rely on clinical terms such as Jane Doe.
But before she was positively identified, Indigenous elders and community advocates specifically chose the name Buffalo Woman.
This was a deliberate structural decision.
In this cultural framework, the buffalo spirit provides a name to individuals who are without one.
The naming convention is designed so that the individual can be acknowledged by the spirit realm and by the community.
It is a way to maintain the humanity and cultural identity of the victim within a highly clinical system.
It was not until March of 2025 that she was formally identified.
Yes, she was identified as 31-year-old Ashley Shingus from the St. Teresa Point First Nation.
The geographical data notes she was last seen at a downtown Salvation Army in Winnipeg.
The records also note a specific identifying detail regarding her clothing. She was thought to have been wearing a reversible baby fat brand jacket with a fur hood.
The delayed identification, spanning approximately 3 years, underscores the difficulties in establishing positive identification for transient populations.
Without immediate familial reporting or stable residential records, the process is severely hindered.
The second victim in the chronological timeline is Morgan Beatrice Harris.
She was 39 years old, a mother of 5 children, and a grandmother to 1.
She was a member of the Long Plain First Nation.
The timeline places her last known location in the area of Winnipeg's Main Street and Henry Avenue. Investigators believe she was killed on May 1, 2022.
The geographical data points, such as Main Street and the downtown Salvation Army, indicate a concentration of activity within specific urban sectors.
Sectors known to service vulnerable populations.
Correct. The third victim is Marcedes Myran.
She was 26 years old and a mother of 2 children. Like Morgan Harris, she was also a member of the Long Plain First Nation.
Her last known location was in the North End neighborhood of Winnipeg.
Police suspect she was killed on May 4, 2022.
The compression of the timeline here is notable.
The interval between the estimated date of the second homicide and the third homicide is merely 3 days.
The fourth victim is Rebecca Stacy Contois.
She was 24 years old and a mother of 1 child. She was a member of the Ochi-Chacosipi First Nation.
Police allege that she was killed on either May 14 or May 15, 2022.
An objective analysis of this chronological data reveals a high-density timeline.
The occurrence of 4 homicides compressed into a 2-month period indicates a rapid escalation in the frequency of the offenses.
The intervals between the events decrease significantly as the timeline progresses from mid-March to mid-May of 2022.
That brings the timeline to the initial investigative phase.
Yes, we will reconstruct the sequence of events as they occurred during the immediate discoveries in May and June of 2022.
The sequence begins on May 16, 2022.
On that date, the partial remains of Rebecca Stacy Contois were discovered in a garbage bin.
The bin was located near an apartment complex in the North Kildonan neighborhood of Winnipeg.
Authorities documented this location as a horrifically grisly scene.
The utilization of residential waste management infrastructure for the concealment of evidence introduces severe complications to standard forensic recovery operations.
Just 2 days after that discovery, on May 18, 2022, authorities formally charged Jeremy Skibicki with the murder of Rebecca Contois.
Upon his detainment, the records indicate a procedural development.
He provided a videotaped confession while in police custody. During this confession, he made a direct statement regarding his motive.
He stated to the authorities, "I believe this was something that God called me to do."
The assertion of a divine mandate during a custodial confession is a very specific psychological phenomenon.
In the context of the previously analyzed APPMEF ideological affiliations, this statement suggests a framework of self-justification.
He is rationalizing extreme actions through a perceived higher authority.
Correct. It is a mechanism utilized to bypass standard moral or societal constraints.
Following his arrest, the investigation rapidly expanded. On May 24, 2022, authorities issued a public alert requesting assistance in locating Morgan Harris.
By June 2, 2022, the authorities initiated a physical forensic search.
They began searching the Brady Road landfill to locate the remainder of Rebecca Contois' remains. This operational step is notable for its procedural adaptation.
The search commenced with the lighting of a sacred fire.
This demonstrates the direct involvement of Indigenous community members alongside standard law enforcement.
The operational protocols at the Brady Road search site demonstrate an integration of cultural practices within a strict forensic perimeter.
It requires meticulous logistical coordination to manage that.
A dual-track approach must be established. The perimeter must be secured for forensic integrity while allowing designated spaces for cultural observance.
Several weeks later, on June 21, 2022, search teams successfully located more of Contois' remains at the Brady Road facility.
The investigation then entered a prolonged phase of internal data consolidation.
It continued behind the scenes for several months. This culminated in a major announcement on December 1st, 2022.
The Winnipeg police announced 3 additional first-degree murder charges against Skibicki.
These charges were for the killings of Harris, Myran, and the victim then known as Buffalo Woman.
The interval between the June recovery and the December charges likely involved complex forensic analysis and the tracking of waste management vehicles.
Because they needed to establish the logistical movements to determine the locations of the other victims.
That logistical tracking introduces the central operational conflict of the narrative.
The Prairie Green landfill debate. This spans several years and involves massive proposed funding.
The core complication emerged regarding the remains of Morgan Harris and Marcedes Myran.
The investigative timeline determined that their remains had been deposited in a dumpster several blocks away from where Rebecca Contois' remains were found.
The divergence in the initial deposition sites creates parallel yet distinct logistical chains for the investigators.
Crucially, on that same day, May 16, 2022, the contents of that specific dumpster containing the remains of Harris and Myran were collected.
They were collected by a different waste management route.
Exactly. They were transported to a completely different facility.
They were taken to the Prairie Green landfill,
which is located in the rural municipality of Rosser, just north of Winnipeg.
Once evidence enters a mechanized waste stream, the geographical footprint of the crime scene expands exponentially.
It no longer encompasses a single geographical coordinate.
It includes the transfer stations, the transport vehicles, the compaction mechanisms, and ultimately, large-scale, multi-acre landfill sites.
Homicide investigators did not fully realize that the remains were likely at the Prairie Green landfill until June 20, 2022.
The site was briefly closed down in June, but this closure was kept quiet from the general public.
The operational reality was severe. Between the deposition of the remains on May 16th and the police realization on June 20, a massive volume of material was moved.
Approximately 10,000 loads of garbage had been deposited into that specific area of the landfill.
The accumulation of 10,000 loads of municipal and commercial waste over a 34-day period creates a severe stratificational barrier.
The target evidence becomes buried under thousands of tons of compacted material.
It fundamentally alters the parameters of a standard forensic search into an excavation of massive scale.
Due to this massive accumulation, the Winnipeg police made a formal operational announcement.
On December 6, 2022, they announced that they determined a search of the site was unfeasible.
The declaration of unfeasibility shifted the burden of proof. It moved the discourse from a standard criminal justice procedure into a debate over structural engineering.
This declaration triggered a massive public and governmental undertaking.
The federal government intervened.
On December 15, 2022, the federal government announced it would fund an Indigenous-led feasibility study.
The purpose of the study was to determine if a recovery operation could theoretically be executed.
This study was overseen by the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. I ask you to outline what a feasibility study of this magnitude entails.
A feasibility study for a landfill excavation requires a multidisciplinary approach. It involves civil engineers to assess the structural stability of the waste cells.
They also need environmental scientists.
Yes, to evaluate the presence of hazardous materials and biogases. It also requires logistical experts to determine the necessary machinery.
Machinery such as conveyor belts and specialized sifting facilities.
Furthermore, it requires a detailed analysis of occupational health and safety protocols for the personnel conducting the manual sorting of hazardous material.
When the feasibility study was completed, it concluded that a search was theoretically possible.
However, the initial estimated cost was substantial.
The initial estimate was staggering. It was projected to cost up to $184 million.
It should be noted that this estimate was later deemed to be excessive by subsequent reviews.
Even so, that $184 million figure immediately transformed a forensic recovery operation into a highly charged political standoff.
The generation of that financial estimate fundamentally altered the nature of the public discourse.
The recovery of human remains was no longer solely a matter of justice.
It was incorporated directly into the platform dialectic of public finance and taxation.
I will report the political ramifications exactly as they are documented in the source text.
This occurred during the 2023 Manitoba general election.
During that election, this potential search became a defining platform issue. The incumbent Progressive Conservative Party, led by Premier Heather Stephenson, formally opposed the search.
The incumbent party actively campaigned on this opposition.
They ran political advertisements highlighting their commitment not to proceed with the landfill search.
Their stated rationale was based on the safety risks and the financial costs.
Conversely, the opposition New Democratic Party, the NDP, led by Wab Kinew, actively supported conducting the search.
The resolution to this political standoff was decided by the electorate.
The NDP won the 2023 election, and Wab Kinew became premier.
Following the transition of power, the logistical operation commenced.
Fulfilling his campaign promise, Kinew officially launched the search of the Prairie Green landfill in December 2024.
The financial structure of this finalized search was vastly different from the initial estimates.
It was funded by a $40 million joint contribution, split evenly between the provincial and federal governments.
The operational outcome of this search was rapid.
Highly successful and rapid. On February 26, 2025, searchers located the remains of Morgan Harris and Marcedes Myran at the landfill.
They were officially identified by police in March 2025.
Premier Kinew later stated that because the discovery happened so quickly, the operation came in significantly under budget.
The eventual execution of the search for $40 million demonstrates a significant variance.
A variance between preliminary feasibility estimates and applied operational execution.
The practical application of the engineering strategy proved more efficient than the initial projections modeled by the feasibility committee.
We must now turn to a confusing variable that occurred right in the middle of this timeline.
The documentation outlines the anomaly of Linda Mary Beardy.
It is vital to accurately reconstruct this event to understand the atmosphere in Winnipeg at the time.
The event occurred on April 4, 2023.
While the debate over the Prairie Green landfill was dominating the news cycle, workers at the Brady Road Resource Management Facility discovered a body.
The geographical location of the discovery is the critical variable.
It matches the initial recovery site associated with the confirmed homicides.
This individual was identified as Linda Mary Beardy.
She was 33 years old, a member of the Lake St. Martin First Nation, and a resident of Winnipeg.
The public reaction to this discovery was immediate.
Initial fears skyrocketed across the community that Linda Mary Beardy was a fifth victim of Jeremy Skibicki.
This reaction serves as a clinical example of investigative overlap and heightened public anxiety.
The geographical overlap was the primary cause for this assumption, as she was found at the exact same Brady Road facility where some of Rebecca Contois' remains had been located.
When a community is actively processing the confirmed presence of a serial killer, any subsequent fatality matching the demographic is immediately assimilated into the existing threat narrative.
This discovery renewed fierce and immediate calls from victims' families and advocates to search all local landfills.
However, the subsequent police findings diverged completely from the public assumption.
The Winnipeg police conducted an investigation and determined that Linda Mary Beardy was not a victim of a homicide.
According to the authorities, the timeline of events was documented by external observers.
Witnesses reported seeing her independently climbing into a garbage bin hours before the scheduled residential pickup.
The garbage truck subsequently emptied the bin and transported the contents to the landfill.
Police Chief Danny Smith stated publicly that the medical examination showed there were no injuries suggesting any kind of foul play.
The forensic determination of an accidental death involving the exact same municipal waste infrastructure represents a statistical anomaly.
Yet it was confirmed by witness corroboration and medical examination. Despite these official findings, the source text notes that Beardy's family released a statement criticizing the police.
The family specifically criticized the transparency of the Winnipeg police approach.
They expressed deep doubt and concern that the authorities may not have completed a sufficiently thorough investigation.
The divergence between public hypothesis and empirical investigation creates friction.
Why would the family reject the findings so strongly if the police provided witness accounts and medical evidence?
The family's public criticism illustrates a profound manifestation of institutional distrust,
stemming from the broader context of the other cases.
In the aftermath of the delayed discoveries, the massive logistical failures of the waste tracking, and the ongoing political debate regarding the other victims, foundational trust was compromised.
So a non-homicide event was interpreted through the lens of systemic negligence.
This demonstrates how secondary incidents are heavily influenced by the prevailing atmosphere of primary criminal investigations.
We will now proceed to outline the trial and the eventual conviction.
The legal proceedings are meticulously documented.
The pretrial phase occurred between November 2023 and January 2024. During this period, Skibicki's legal defense team attempted a specific maneuver.
They entered a plea of not guilty and filed a motion regarding the structure of the trial.
They requested that the trial be heard solely by a judge, entirely bypassing a jury trial. The Crown opposed this motion.
Procedurally, the initial denial of a judge-only trial highlights a specific statutory requirement within the Canadian legal system.
On January 24, 2024, a judge formally ruled that Skibicki did not possess the right to a judge-only trial without the explicit consent of the Crown.
The waiver of a jury trial for severe offenses, such as first-degree murder, mandates the consent of the prosecution.
The motion was initially denied. However, a significant legal shift occurred in May of 2024.
Skibicki's legal team decided they would alter their defense strategy.
They decided that they would not contest the physical facts of the case. They agreed not to contest that Skibicki had indeed killed the 4 women.
In legal terminology, they conceded the actus reus,
The physical act of committing the homicides.
By conceding the actus reus, the defense bypasses the necessity of contesting forensic evidence and witness testimonies regarding the timeline.
Based on this concession, both the defense and the Crown agreed to proceed with a judge-only trial.
The defense's strategy shifted entirely to pursuing a different legal finding.
They pursued a finding of not criminally responsible, commonly referred to as NCR. They asserted that he was suffering from a mental disorder at the time of the offenses.
The transition from a standard not guilty defense to a not criminally responsible plea represents a fundamental shift in legal burden.
How does the mechanics of an NCR defense operate in the courtroom?
The strategy relies entirely on satisfying the threshold for mental disorder under the law.
The defense must prove that the individual possessed an incapacity to appreciate the nature and quality of the acts.
Or an incapacity to know that the acts were morally or legally wrong due to a severe mental disorder.
The focus of the trial shifts entirely from forensic evidence to psychiatric evaluations
and expert testimony regarding the perpetrator's state of mind during the specific time frame of the crimes.
The trial proceeded before Chief Justice Glenn Joyal of the Court of King's Bench of Manitoba.
The judicial ruling was delivered in the summer.
On July 11, 2024, Chief Justice Joyal issued his ruling. He denied the NCR plea in its entirety.
And he found Skibicki guilty on all 4 counts of first-degree murder.
The final ruling indicates that the defense failed to meet the rigorous evidentiary standards required to establish an NCR designation.
The court determined that the perpetrator possessed the requisite intent and understanding of his actions.
The legal process concluded on August 28, 2024, when Skibicki was formally sentenced.
He received 4 concurrent life sentences.
Under this sentence, he has no possibility of parole for 25 years, at which point he will be 60 years old.
This outcome represents the mandatory statutory penalty for first-degree murder under Canadian law,
which is life imprisonment with a 25-year parole ineligibility period.
The concurrent nature of the sentences means they're served simultaneously rather than consecutively.
For our final analytical section, we will examine the societal reactions and the political apologies that followed the conclusion of the trial.
The documentation includes responses from various sectors of society.
Starting at the municipal and law enforcement level, Winnipeg Police Chief Danny Smith and Mayor Scott Gillingham both held press conferences.
They specifically highlighted the extreme vulnerability caused by homelessness, addiction, and poverty.
They acknowledged that these structural issues were directly related to the victim's circumstances.
The acknowledgement by municipal leadership indicates an institutional recognition.
A recognition that the events were facilitated by systemic socioeconomic failures rather than solely individual criminal intent.
At the federal government level, legislative action was proposed.
Members of Parliament Leah Gazan, representing Winnipeg Centre, and Nikki Ashton, representing Churchill-Kiewit-Kanukaski, called for an emergency debate.
They requested a debate in the House of Commons regarding the epidemic of violence.
This initial request for a debate was denied. However, MP Leah Gazan continued to push for legislative action.
She specifically proposed the creation of a red dress alert system.
A system designed to notify the public when Indigenous women go missing. The source material confirms that a motion for this red dress alert was unanimously adopted by the House of Commons.
The conceptualization and unanimous adoption of the red dress alert motion indicates a rare institutional consensus.
A consensus that existing notification protocols are simply insufficient.
Standard emergency alerts are typically reserved for specific criteria regarding abducted children or immediate public safety threats.
The proposed red dress system attempts to apply the rapid response mechanics of an emergency alert to a specific demographic crisis.
It acknowledges the unique vulnerabilities faced by Indigenous populations.
We also have documented statements from Indigenous leadership, Grand Chief Jerry Daniels of the Southern Chiefs Organization and Chief Kyra Wilson of the Long Plain First Nation both issued statements.
Their remarks focused heavily on the necessity for further structural support.
They emphasized the disproportionate multi-generational violence that has been committed against Indigenous women over many years.
These statements contextualize the events not as an isolated anomaly, but as a continuation of established historical and sociological patterns.
Finally, we must document the political apologies that occurred between 2024 and 2025.
These statements address the fallout from the 2023 Manitoba election campaign.
The records state that defeated Premier Heather Stephenson formally apologized for running the campaign advertisements.
The advertisements that highlighted her party's commitment not to search the landfill.
The sequence of apologies illustrates a methodical political course correction following an electoral defeat.
Following her departure, the course correction continued within the Progressive Conservative Party.
In March 2025, interim PC leader Wayne Owasco issued an apology for those same 2023 campaign ads.
Subsequently, newly elected PC leader Abi Khan issued a formal statement.
In May 2025, he used his first legislative speech as leader to also formally apologize for the landfill search campaign ads.
Following the successful recovery of the remains under the newly elected government, the previous platform opposing the search was recognized as a permanent political liability.
The issuance of formal apologies by the defeated premier, the interim leader, and the newly elected leader demonstrates an institutional necessity.
A necessity to disavow the prior strategic calculus in order to rehabilitate the party's public standing.
Standing on matters concerning Indigenous relations and forensic justice. As we conclude this extensive exploration, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over based on the source material we have reviewed.
The structural data provides a clear metric for evaluation.
Consider the immense structural machinery that is required simply to enact basic justice. When you look at the timeline we have built, it took years of persistent advocacy, the shifting of political power at the highest provincial levels, the appropriation of millions of dollars in joint funding, and unprecedented, highly complex logistical landfill engineering just to retrieve the basic physical evidence of these crimes.
The resource allocation required for resolution was extraordinarily high.
It forces you to wonder, given the sheer magnitude of effort required to resolve this one documented instance, just how many systemic blind spots still exist in our infrastructure, completely obscuring the realities faced by the most vulnerable members of society on a daily basis. Thanks for listening.